once again. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarne. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So we are continuing with our series on Srila Rupa Goswami and his service to his beloved deity of Govindaji. So far we have covered his discovery of Govindaji in Vrindavan, where he then established the worship of Govindaji. We also discussed the amazing pastime, how Emperor Akbar and Rajman Singh cooperated together to build the architectural wonder of the big temple for Govindaji. And we concluded our last lecture with Srila Jiva Goswami's Govinda Mandir Ashtakam, that special Ashtakam, which he spoke upon seeing the temple completed. We also mentioned that unfortunately Srila Rupa Goswami departed a number of years before that temple was completed. And actually his Tirubhav Mahotsava, his Disappearance Day festival, is the day after tomorrow. So I thought today we could discuss his departure. Srila Prabhupada writes in Nectar of Devotion, quote, "In the supplementary Vedic literature, there is the following list of 32 offenses in the matter of serving the Lord. Number 1, one should not enter the temple of the deity in a car or palanquin, or with shoes on the feet. And number 2, one should not fail to observe the various festivals for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, such as Janmashtami, Rath-yatra, etc. So we want to properly observe the Disappearance Day of Srila Rupa Goswami in a couple of days, so this is preparation. Actually, if one thinks carefully about it, the glories of Srila Rupa Goswami are twofold. Twofold. For in the spiritual world, he is Rupa Manjari, and in the material world, he is Rupa Goswami. Kavi Karnapura states in his Gora Gunadesha Dipika, Shri Rupa Manjari Khyata Yasid Vrindavani Pura Sadhya Rupakya Goswami Bhutva Parkat Tatam Yat. Quote, Shri Rupa Manjari, who has been famous in Vrindavan Dham, appeared as Srila Rupa Goswami. So volumes could be written on either of those identities. In the spiritual world, in Goloka Vrindavan, Srimati Radharani, Krishna's most beloved consort, is served by 8 maidservants called Sakis, who are around 14 years of age. We've discussed this in detail in previous lectures, but there's Lalita, Chitra, Champaklata, Tungavidya, Vishaka, Rangadevi, Sudevi, and Induleka. Now each of those 8 principal Sakis are served by younger girls called Manjaris, who are actually around 6 years of age. And Lalita Saki's group of Manjaris includes, of course, Rupa Manjari, Rasa Manjari, Guna Manjari, Lavanga Manjari, Vilas Manjari, Kashturi Manjari, Manjulali Manjari, and Rati Manjari. It's often stated that our Rupa Manjari is 13 years and 6 months old. Of course, that contradicts our previous statement that the Manjaris are 6 years of age. But the Acharyas say that the Manjaris are very young while Krishna is in Braj. But by the time he leaves for Mathura, they are eternally 13 years old. That explains it. Just like some months ago, we gave a class about the 3 stages of Krishna's youth. The first stage of his youth is called Kumara, from 1 to 5 years of age. His boyhood is called Poganda from 6 years to 10 years age, and his Kaishora age lasts from 11 to 15 years of age. But when he reaches the maturity of that Kaishora age, he remains forever 16. Prabhupada said, you'll never see a picture of or painting of Krishna older than 16. He's no yovanamcha, he's eternally youthful. Now, there's also different stages of Radharani's youth as well. Of course, because she's a gopi. But I read when Krishna's in Vrindavan, the Brajavasis address her as Radha. But when Krishna leaves Vrindavan to go to Mathura and Dwarka, then they address her as Radhika. How is that? The idea being that Adhika means higher. So when Krishna leaves Braj, Radharani experiences higher separation, and thus she's addressed as Radhika. So Radha when she's young, and then when Krishna leaves Braj, her intensity, that separation is very intense, that Adhika, so she's addressed as Radhika. It's very beautiful. So Shri Radha's servant, Rupa Manjari, is described as the color of Gorochana. It's a bright yellow. And she wears a dress the color of peacock feathers. So like that. We can just begin to appreciate how exalted is Rupa Goswami as the incarnation of Sri Rupa Manjari. So we gave a class last year in which we mentioned the scripture, Sadhana Deepika. Actually, we've quoted it many times, wherein some of the skills of Sri Rupa Goswami are mentioned in his mission of serving Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this world. Therein is stated that, quote, he could prepare deities, he could draw expertly, he was a master of astrology and mathematics, he was fluent in Sanskrit, Persian, Bengali, and other languages. And he was also a renowned Gaudiya Vaishnava philosopher and scholar, and well known to many sampradayas. That's actually stated there. But actually, I was thinking that Srila Rupa Goswami's pastimes were not limited to those, to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's lila 500 years ago. His influence extends even into our modern era. How so? Well, my dear godbrother, His Holiness Srivaram Swami writes in his well-researched book called Nava Braja Mahima. He writes that one night Srila Prabhupada had a dream when he was living in the Vamsi Gopal temple in Vrindavan, the first place he stayed when he went to Vrindavan, before he came to the West, wherein he saw many Vaishnavas in this dream chanting around Rupa Goswami, who was sitting in the courtyard of his samadhi and looking at Srila Prabhupada in a very affectionate way. So Srila Prabhupada said that he accepted the dream as a call from Rupa Goswami, and he moved from that first place he was staying to the Radha Damodar temple, where he spent most of his time in Vrindavan. It's interesting. Rupa Goswami was calling him. So Srila Prabhupada once said that he would often sit in front of Rupa Goswami's samadhi and pray, quote, "O Rupa Goswami, please show yourself to me and give me guidance and strength to realize my mission." And one of Srila Prabhupada's earlier disciples, my dear godbrother Guru Das, once narrated a story Prabhupada had personally told him. Srila Prabhupada said that when he was in Vrindavan at the Radha Damodar temple, he would always meditate upon Rupa Goswami while taking his meals, because where he took his meals in that particular room, he could see Sri Rupa Goswami's samadhi through a small window of his kitchen and where he took prasad. And Prabhupada went on to say that one day Rupa Goswami appeared to him and told him, quote, "Now you have written some books. Take them to the Western countries and preach. Do not hesitate any longer. The Prabhupada related this to Guru Das. So we, the modern day representatives, just to see what is our position. We are representatives of Srila Rupa Goswami. We can pray for his blessings in this regard, and we do. Everyone knows that prayer. Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Shtapitam Jena Bhutale Shwayam Rupa Kadamayam Tatati Svapanantikam. When will Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, who has established within this material world the mission to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya, give me shelter under his lotus feet? That prayer is very dear to all Gaudiya Vaishnavas because we are, in essence, Rupanugas, followers of Srila Rupa Goswami. And in his epic book, Lalita Madhava, Rupa Goswami has left all of us his mercy in the form of a prayer encouraging us, each and every one of the members of International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He's encouraged us in the Yuga Dharma of chanting the holy names. There's that beautiful prayer he writes in Lalita Madhava. Quote, it's also quoted in Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila 199. And it's a favorite of devotees. I do not know how much nectar the two syllables Krishna have produced. When the holy name of Krishna is chanted, it appears to dance within the mouth. We then desire many, many mouths. When that name enters the holes of the ears, we desire many millions of ears. And when the holy name dances in the courtyard of the heart, it conquers the activities of the mind, and therefore all the senses become inert. Thank you, Srila Rupa Goswami. So now we'll go into some detail, just when and how Srila Rupa Goswami left this world. To begin with, it was in 1558 that his elder brother, dearmost friend, and lifelong companion, Srila Sanatana Goswami, departed this world. Now, Srila Sanatana Goswami left his body at Manasi Ganga, at Govardhan Hill. An event, I've read, the scholars say, quote, was as painful for the Vaishnava community of Braj as was the departure of Lord Chaitanya. So Srila Rupa Goswami performed the funeral ceremony, and he placed the body of Sanatana Goswami in Samadhi near the Madan Mohan temple. And then he arranged a great feast for devotees, and then he retired to his bhajan kutir at Yogapith. We can just imagine feeling, deep and intense separation from Srila Sanatana Goswami. We can hardly imagine. So 2 years later, in 1560, Emperor Akbar, that's when he gave permission, land, and money for the construction of the big temple of Govindadev. And that temple construction began in 1560. Now, in my research, I found different dates, but it's always like that, different dates. But that's the date that we've settled on in our research in the Vrindavan Research Center. Wonderful facility for us. So now, in order to build the temple, that magnificent temple, some of the Vrindavan forest at Yogapith, where Rupa Goswami had discovered Govindaji and Rajman Singh had decided that was the best place to build this big temple, some of the forest, I was reading, had to be cut down, obviously. But as happy as the devotees were that a temple was going to be built, it's clearly written, they simultaneously lamented the destruction of some of the Vrindavan forest. Now you may remember that this was one of Rupa Goswami's concerns. We discussed this in our last lecture. When Man Singh had expressed his initial desire to build this temple for Govindaji, Rupa Goswami was uncomfortable with the idea because, well, he said that, Govindaji is happy in the nature of Vrindavan. But he also expressed concern, you're going to cut down some of these desire trees. It's a little uncomfortable, but he consented in the long run. Just to give you an idea how concerned the devotees present in Vrindavan at that time were about keeping and maintaining the natural beauty of Vrindavan, I would like to share with you a heartfelt poem that we found just yesterday in the Vrindavan Research Institute, written by a Brajbasi poet who was present at that actual time, when they're discussing, okay, we have to clear the forest here, clear it there, like devotees like, well, these are all desire trees, this is the natural beauty of Vrindavan. Had to be done, of course, but devotees were upset. So this particular devotee, we found his palm leaf manuscript in the Institute, nearly destroyed by time and insects, etc. This is why we want to work in that institute to preserve these scriptures. We found these palm leaves, and we could barely make out that Vaishnava's name, but we did. His name is Ram Vyasa. That was his name, Ram Vyasa. And the title of the book, or the Shastra that he wrote, was called Vyasavani. And somehow we could even make out the verse number, 263. It's very significant, just to see, it's so nectarian to see these little details of how the community of devotees felt about this, cutting down part of the forest. So Hariram Vyas wrote in Braj Bhasa language. We had to call in a specialist. In the Braj Bhasa language, he wrote, Ab Sancho hi Kala Yuga Ayo, Mathura Kudhati Katala Brindaban, Muni Jana Soch Ubhayo, Itno Dukha Sahibe Ke Kache, Kahe Kon Vyas Jivayo. Listen to this. Quote, now Kali Yuga has finally appeared. Mathura is being dug up, and the forests of Vrindavan are being cut down. All the sages are worried and trying to think of a solution. So why have I, Vyas, been given such a long life to bear this pain? Unquote. Now I also found a quote by Mirabai, the famous lady devotee. She's very famous for her bhajans. When she came to Braj, she expressed similar concerns in one of her songs, 500 years ago, same time frame. Bhaye Navin Mahal Kunjan Ke, she wrote. Bhaye Navin Mahal Kunjan Ke. It's short, but significant. Now the kunjas of Vrindavan are being converted into great and new palaces. I think she's speaking about it in a general way. Now the kunjas, the forests of Vrindavan, are being converted into great and new palaces. Of course, we all know it was the desire of Lord Chaitanya that the six Goswamis reestablish deity worship in Braj. And for that reason, Rupa Goswami gave his permission for a temple to be built. But of course, that's different than the unrestricted, ever-expanding, poor construction of factories and apartment buildings and malls and etc. that are taking place now in Braja, at the expense and destruction of historic buildings, monuments, and sacred places in Vrindavan. It's a little bit different. Anyway, we're all concerned, aren't we, when you come to Vrindavan and you just see the cosmopolitan expansion. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. Can we do it in a more natural way and clean up Vrindavan? So it's still a concern, isn't it? Even more so. But pleased that a wonderful temple was being built for the glorification of his deity, which would attract so many people to Vrindavan, but distracted by the construction that was going on. After some time, Rupa Goswami shifted from his bhajan at Yogapith to Sevakunj, another part of Vrindavan, where Rasa Lila takes place, to focus on his bhajan. Now, it's a little difficult, but 4 years later, on the day of Pavitra Ekadasi, in the year 1564, Jiva Goswami and a few others took Rupa Goswami from Sevakunj to Yogapith to have darshan of Govindaji. In that smaller temple still exists. Remember that Raghunath Bhatta Goswami's disciple had established a smaller temple for the time being. So they took Rupa Goswami to that smaller Govinda temple where Govindaji was being worshipped. Now by this time Rupa Goswami was elderly, and it took a number of devotees to assist him in going there. And there Rupa Goswami offered various types of colorful silk threads called Pavitras. It's popular in ISKCON, those Pavitras. He offered Pavitras to Govindadev. These Pavitras were made of 108 colorful knots. It was a tradition. And he did so with the following mantra. And this mantra is actually used by many Vaishnavas because it's written in Hari Bhakti Vilas. It's Vilas 15, verses 228 and 229. This is the mantra that Rupa Goswami offered the Pavitra to Govindaji. It's very interesting. And we can follow suit. O Krishna, O fruit giver of yearly worship, I offer my obeisances to you. Please accept this Pavitra for my purification. O Lord, please purify the offenses I made in your service. O Lord, O Janardhan, may I be purified by your mercy. Hare Krishna. Now sadly, that was Rupa Goswami's last darshan of Govindadev. And after circumambulating his beloved Ishtadev, he went back to Sevakunj. And the next day, he left this world. Now, needless to say, how to express it in words actually, needless to say, all of Vrindavan was plunged into lamentation. I was reading that when Srila Sanatana Goswami left this world, Raghunath Das Goswami, who was staying out at Radhakund, of course, when Sanatana Goswami left this world, Raghunath Das Goswami gave up eating from that point on and only drank water. And when Rupa Goswami left, he gave up even drinking water and kept himself alive simply by chanting the names of Radha and Krishna. That's what I read. He kept himself alive simply by chanting the names of Radha and Krishna. Hare Krishna. So, Srila Jiva Goswami, of course, we know he was the younger of the 6 Goswamis and a great organizer, etc., visionary. He wanted to place Rupa Goswami in Samadhi at Yogapith. That was the tradition at that time. When an acharya left, he would be placed in Samadhi near to his Ishtadev in the Ishtadev's temple. But because, massive construction was still going on, it was really the initial stages of building the Govindaji temple at Yogapith. Because of all this construction going on, Srila Jiva Goswami made the decision to place Rupa Goswami at one of his favorite places of bhajan, again, at Sevakunj, where eventually Jiva Goswami's temple, Radha Damodar temple, was built. And therefore, when we go to Radha Damodar temple, one of our main reasons of going there is to take darshan of the Samadhi Mandir of Sri Rupa Goswami. So historically, it became a tradition that Gaudiya Vaishnavas who visited Vrindavan would first visit the samadhi of Rupa Goswami at Sevakunj and then go to Yogapeeth and take darshan of Govindaji. Such nice details of history. It makes everything more personal, you could say. Hearing about the lives of our heroes. These are our heroes. I should also mention that when the news of Rupa Goswami's departure reached one of our great heroes, the Rajput king, Rajman Singh, he was particularly distressed. It said he closed himself off in a room and just cried for days. Big warrior, he cried for days. But it's written that in the long run, he took shelter in the understanding that the Lord and his intimate associates and their service to the Lord, it's all eternal. It's all eternal. And in my research at the Institute, I came across a beautiful verse in that regard. Again, it's in the Braj Bhasa language. It's a very beautiful verse. Chandra miti dhinkar mite, miti trigon vishtar, durid varat shri harivash ko, mite na nitye vihar. This is the local language of Braj. Quote, one day the moon will come to an end. One day the sun will come to an end. Even the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, will end. But the poet Harivamsa says, the pastimes of the Lord will never end and will go on forever and forevermore. We're indebted to these poets and these scribes and these devotees who, in the past have given us so much nectar in the form of their writings, and which we as modern-day Vaishnavas imbibe and gives us enthusiasm to serve our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada and the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We feel very close to them, actually. So after the disappearance of Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis and other great devotees of their time, such departure days have been celebrated in a big way. We celebrate the appearance day of great acharyas, devotees, spiritual masters. We also celebrate their disappearance days. And in our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, the disappearance day is often celebrated with more pomp and circumstance, to use an English phrase, than their appearance days. We celebrate the disappearance day even more than the appearance day, at least as part of our tradition. And one might question why. Why observe the disappearance day of a saintly devotee in a greater fashion than their appearance day? And the answer is that when such great acharyas appear in this world, their glories are not yet known. But by the time they depart, who they are and what glorious things they have accomplished are all well known to those who are interested. The example is given of a lotus flower. In the morning, the lotus flower is closed, but by the end of the day, with the influence of the sun's rays, it's fully open and can be appreciated by everyone. So similarly, when a great devotee is born, it's a baby, what can you know? So, but that by the time he leaves, his glories are known. So in that sense, in our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, the tradition has been that the disappearance days served in an even bigger way than the appearance day. Hare Krishna. So in our next class, we'll discuss the atrocities of the Muslim tyrant Aurangzeb and how he attacked Govinda's temple, and how Govinda was saved, and many deities were saved, and of course, as we know, taken to Jaipur. That's a whole class, or maybe two classes. But today, let us finish on a sweet note, remembering the glories of Srila Rupa Goswami, whose Disappearance Day festival is coming the day after tomorrow. And we'll finish on a sweet note from Srila Narottam Das Thakur's, another one of our heroes, his Prarthana, Song 17, very appropriate. Quote, "I've heard from the mouths of pure devotees that by the mercy of Srila Rupa Goswami, one can attain the lotus feet of Sri Radha and Krishna. O my Lord Sanatana Goswami and the associates of Gauranga, all of you kindly fulfill my deeper desires. Let the mercy of Sri Rupa Goswami be upon me, for whoever has taken shelter of him is my master. When will my Lord Lokanath Goswami take me with him and place me at the lotus feet of Sri Rupa? When will it ever happen to me that the dearmost Sakis will chastise their servant, Narottam Das?" Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. I'll finish there. And we'll be back with part 5 of our series of the glories of Srirupa Goswami and his Istadev, Govindaji. We still have a few more lectures to go. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shama Sundar ki, Vrindavaneshwari Srimati Radharani ki, Shri Govinda Dev ki, Rupa Goswami ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaura Premanandi. Jai Jai Sri Radhe Sharma.